We've been talking about Liz Cheney and the fallout from her vote to impeach President Trump. Joining me to discuss this is Wyoming State Rep Chuck Gray, who may be the guy who takes Liz on and beats her in the Republican primary next year. Also joining us is conservative pollster John McLaughlin. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks.
So let's start with you, Chuck. Are you're considering running against Liz Cheney? What prompts you to do that?
Yes, I'm strongly considering running. I'm listening to conservatives, the businesses in Wyoming that are hurting from the actions of Liz Cheney and Biden and who President Trump protected. And Liz Cheney, she doesn't represent us, Dick, as you were talking about in your monologue. The impeachment vote, it was an enormous betrayal. It was disgusting, really, and unconscionable. And President Trump has been fiercely loyal to Wyoming and to our country. And this impeachment narrative could have come out of an ice cream social at Nancy Pelosi's house with her $24,000 refrigerator packed with gourmet ice cream. And Liz was the first one there, first one in line, like you talked about, participating in this and voting for impeachment. And it's wrong.
John, can she win again?
Well, I tell you, we did the survey that you've seen for the Save America PAC for President Trump, for his PAC. And the problem is people in Wyoming see this whole process very differently than people in Washington. This impeachment process is a kangaroo court. It's a lynching of somebody that they voted for 70% of their vote. So so you got Wyoming voters, 70% saying it's unconstitutional. And what she did was she blew up her base, where in effect President got 70% of the vote. November 3rd, she got 69%, and she turned against them. So you have now 63% of all voters in Wyoming saying they're less likely to vote for her because 70% of Wyoming voters see this whole process as unconstitutional. So it's not just a break in politics. It's a break in principle, because Wyoming voters really see this as wrong. They see this as basically you're impeaching and trying a private citizen who's no longer in office. And that's scary to people out there who really base their lives on principle. And now they're seeing Joe Biden stop them from being able to explore for oil and gas on federal lands out there. And a lot of Wyomings make their living that way. So it's really bad for the Wyoming economy. So this is a real break between Washington and the people of Wyoming. And when we asked in our survey, which was published on January 27th, would you vote to reelect Liz Cheney? Only 13% of the voters said yes, 10% of the Republicans, 6% of the Trump voters. So it's blown up the political base, and people like Chuck
That's too low for zero.
Yeah. So it's really, and those of us who, I've known Liz from when she supported Fred Thompson, who was a great conservative, when she was trying to help Bibi Netanyahu speak to Congress, who is a great international conservative. This is a huge disconnect with what they thought and what they believe.
Where a lot of Republicans are experiencing that. You have so many of these senators who have defected Bibles, how much they love President Trump. The most recent one, shocking, was Nikki Haley, who, after being appointed UN ambassador to give her foreign policy credentials so she could run for president, says Trump let us down. You think he let us down, Chuck?
No, and let's give an example of how loyal he has been to us, and compared to what has just come out of the Biden administration. Just the last week, there was an announcement that the Coal Creek coal mine is closing. The Black Thunder mine, the second largest coal mine in the country, was announced to have a plan for a reduced footprint. And on the oil and gas side, Biden's oil and gas leasing moratorium announced over 50% of oil drilled in Wyoming is from federal land, and over 80% of natural gas drilled. So that's just in a week in the Biden administration, just the last week, what we've heard. And we're 3 weeks in total compared to what President Trump did, so loyal to our state growth. And this is where we're at here in the state of Wyoming. And Liz Cheney is going along with it, with 70% of our state supporting President Trump and her voting for impeachment.
You know, Chuck, you refer to oil and gas, and I know that that's the way it's normally done. But let me draw a differentiation here. If you believe in climate change, Oil certainly contributes to that, big carbon footprint. But gas is the solution, not the cause of the problem. Gas has half the carbon content of coal and about 40% less than oil. And what's gone on in this country is that because gas has become so cheap, because of the opening of federal lands to gas drilling and fracking, and offshore drilling, gas has replaced coal increasingly. And the United States last year had the biggest reduction in carbon emissions of any other country in the world, including all of those in the Paris Accord. So in stopping gas drilling on federal land, Biden's doing everything he can to accelerate global warming, not to stop it. John, what do you think?
And you see so many examples of this, Dick, where the left doesn't make any sense. They don't want any commerce really in our country, let alone oil, gas, coal. One of the things I've been working on is our coal exports. I mean, we have the cleanest coal in the world, Dick, and the left is refusing to let us have access to Western ports to export our coal. This is exactly what President Trump worked on, diligently talked about, that we need to reduce and get rid of our trade deficit. And the Western states refuse to let us export our coal. It's just like you saw the other day, France when France is concerned about our wokeism in our country, that's when we know we're in trouble. And when we're looking to Canada to export our coal, I mean, this is the situation we're in, where the West Coast, the left wing out there refuses to let us do that. There's so many examples of that.
Chuck, as you also pointed out, and I think it's key here for people to understand it, Wyoming is, of course, landlocked. And you've been trying to get federal permission to send your coal and oil and gas on barges to Washington State, where it can be put on boats and sent around the rest of the world. And Washington State says no, they're not going to let that happen because they want to oppose fossil fuels and they want to impose renewable resources on the world. And you've sued in federal court over interstate commerce, but they're not listening to you. It's disgraceful.
It is. And President Trump gave us federal approval. That's just another example of the loyalty of President Trump and the diligent work that he continues to do for our country. And Liz Cheney votes for impeachment. 70% of the people in Wyoming supported President Trump.
Right.
Now, John,
and by the way,
you've in Washington. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Please, John,
President
I was going to say that
his numbers haven't gone down. He still has a 70 in our survey. He still has this after being impeached. He has this for the second time. He has a 70% favorable rating in Wyoming, and with the Republicans in Wyoming, it was 85%. And his voters, everybody that voted for him, is still favorable to him. So this was a huge mistake. And now they're seeing their president with this. It's a kangaroo court. It's an absolute railroad. So the voters of Wyoming are very honest, very principled, and the person that stood by them, not just oil and gas, but also agriculture and other industries, their economy was booming. And now they're seeing the liberals from the coast trying to shut them down, and Washington trying to shut them down. And it's not just a threat of oil and gas; it's also agriculture too. That they're facing new restrictions. And Trump stood by
the narrative going on. The narrative going on in Washington now is that Trump is losing his base. Nikki Haley said that. He's losing his political viability. That is nonsense. He's hanging on to the Republican Party. They love him more than ever. He could get anything he wants done in the Republican Party among the voters, and it's about time Washington realized it. Thanks very much, guys, for joining me. I really enjoyed it. And Chuck, you run. You run.
Thank you, Dick.
Thank you, Dick.
I'm strongly considering it. Thank you.
In the Morris Makeover segment coming up after the break, we'll discuss a major problem, in this case, the soaring murder rate, that Congress can't seem to get its arms around. And I'll propose a very simple solution.